This is Duke University.
I was wondering whether Robert could begin to tell us about how this collection came about. Could you give us some sense of what is here at Duke and the trajectory also of your discovery?
Wow.
I know that's
Thanks very much. It's an honor to be invited to have this conversation. The short answer to the question, what is here at Duke? The answer is everything. How did it come about? Well, if you keep working as I do every day, after a while, it adds up. When we began, I was just intent on recovering evidence of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. The problem that we faced was that there was so little, so few primary materials. There were some essays, maybe 2 books on Garvey, but nothing that would enable us to reconstruct the inner working of his movement or his life. The problem we have today is a superabundance of material. In other words, we went from a situation of paucity and dearth to one today of superfluity. I contend that all you have to do is look and the stuff will emerge.
Yeah. I was thinking, hang on a minute, of the relevance of the Garvey collection for our present. It seems to me what's really fascinating is this chap, when I was growing up in the Caribbean, we made fun of people from the rural areas. We called them country bookies. And certainly Garvey would be a country bookie. But how did, someone from the rural areas, a country bookie, just, propel, to such heights so that he transcends St. Anne, where he's born, I think.
Yeah.
He transcends Jamaica. And he moves to organize this massive movement, a global movement, really. How is that relevant? How is that kind of global, local sort of intersections, that massive movement? You mentioned the idea of the diaspora. In this instance, it's a moving kind of unit, so to speak, or made up of several members. How is that relevant for our contemporary moment?
Well, it's very relevant. We can quite easily strip away the mystery, the enigma of Garvey and his far-flung and far-reaching mass movement. The movement was built upon the far-reaching and far-flung Caribbean diaspora. And what happened is that once the movement was ignited here in North America in late 1918, West Indians or Caribbean people, wherever they were, heard the echo and they responded to it and formed in their locales, wherever they were, a local chapter or division. I was in the Jamaican archives in Spanish Town, and these archives, this portion of the archive was called, I'm not kidding you, quote, CSO, Secret and Confidential Papers. That translates to Secret and Confidential Papers of the Colonial Secretary's Office. And one of the early files I opened was entitled, quote, Sedition in St. Thomas Parish. Now, when you're in this business long enough, that word sedition is like, whoa, that's my kind of file. Once you see that word, black folks are doing some interesting things here. They're causing the colonialists to try to arrest them and jail them and disrupt and rupture their movement. It's the police record of the suppression of the early Rastafari movement, which began not in Kingston, it turns out, the capital, but out there in eastern St. Thomas. I was like, oh my gosh. So this is what the police had been sitting on. So then I became fascinated by what's in this record, and then I discovered there are a whole set of other records. Now here's my point. The Rastafari movement is a worldwide movement today, once again reflecting the movement of this far-flung Caribbean diaspora. I became so interested in this subject of the Rastafari that embedded in this larger corpus of papers is the largest archive of the original Rastafari movement.
Because I think I remember you saying that these members in the Caribbean were aligning themselves nationally, right? So someone from St. Kitts was different from someone from Jamaica, different from someone from Barbados.
Or Panama, yes.
Right. But that kind of, you referred to that as a sort of ethnic identity.
Yes.
Right, but then that kind of ethnic identity in the United States translates or becomes a kind of racial identity, right? Which allows, it seems to me, for a certain kind of solidarity. But, I mean, how does that allow, for the sort of interlinkages? So ethnicity, racial, how does that work within that movement, within the UNIA?
What's the division of gender within the UNIA here in the United States? Going in, we understood that the Garvey movement was made up to a large extent of West Indian migrants in the east of the US and African Americans. But when you have two large blocks of members, West Indian and African Americans, how does that break down into gendered terms? And what we found after doing a great deal of micro-analysis is that West Indian women played only a small part in the early years of the Garvey movement, and that the women who participated in the movement were largely African American women, and that the movement really was this interesting combination and coalition of West Indian men and African American women. That to me was like, oh my gosh, how do you explain that? What we discovered is that among the West Indian migrant community, the makeup of the family, which was still largely built on Victorian norms of Victorian culture, and those norms translated into the fact that women did not play a visible role in the public sphere. It was considered disreputable for a woman to be out on the street or agitating or marching or being in the public eye. You see, African American women, particularly from the post-Reconstruction period, had built this rich tradition of organizational life. Black women in America led and created numerous public organizations. So what you get is West Indian men meeting in the US with African American women.